The silver raven mask hit the marble floor and shattered into 3 pieces, and with it, every lie Vivian Ashcroft had ever been told about who she was. Around her, the imperial masquerade froze. 200 of the Empire's most dangerous people stood beneath chandeliers that cost more than entire villages, their faces hidden behind silk and jewels and gold-painted leather. The orchestra's violins died mid-note. The waltz stopped breathing. And Lady Seraphina Voltaire, the woman who had just torn the mask from Vivian's face, stepped back with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. The birthmark on Vivian's neck burned under the chandelier light, like a brand. Small, crescent-shaped, unmistakable. They all see it now, she thought. They all know. Beside her, Duke Cedric Ashcroft didn't move. His hand remained at the small of her back, steady as iron, but she felt the tension in his fingers, the way they pressed just slightly harder against the silk of her gown. He was calculating. He was always calculating. This is where everything collapses. This is where the most powerful family in the Empire discovers that scandal doesn't arrive with warning. It arrives with a woman who knows exactly when to strike. Stay with me. Because the mask that fell tonight wasn't the only thing hiding the truth. And before dawn breaks over Blackthorn Palace, someone in this ballroom will be dead. The evening had started 3 hours earlier, back when Vivian still believed she knew her own name. She had arrived at Blackthorn Palace in a carriage bearing the Ashcroft crest, a raven clutching a crown, stitched in silver thread across midnight blue cushions. The cobblestones beneath the wheels were slick from afternoon rain, and the palace rose above the capital like a monument to everything the Empire believed about itself. Power, permanence, the lie that blood always tells the truth. Cedric sat across from her, silent. He had been silent for most of the ride from the Ashcroft estate, his gray eyes fixed on something outside the window that only he could see. At 32, he wore authority the way other men wore cologne, subtle, expensive, impossible to ignore. His black coat was tailored to perfection, the embroidery along the cuffs done by a seamstress who charged more per stitch than most families earned in a month. His dark hair was pushed back from a face that looked carved rather than born, all hard angles and aristocratic bones. Vivian had been married to him for 2 years. She still didn't know if she loved him or feared him. Maybe there wasn't a difference. "The mask you'll wear tonight," he had said that morning while she dressed. "The silver raven." No other. She hadn't asked why. You didn't ask Cedric Ashcroft why. You simply did what he said and hoped he was protecting you from something you couldn't yet see. The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door and extended a gloved hand she didn't take. She had learned to exit carriages on her own, to stand without help, to never look weak in front of people who measured weakness the way bankers measured coin. The palace entrance was a cathedral of marble and gold. Red velvet draped the grand staircase like spilled wine, and above it, a chandelier the size of a small house hung from chains thick as a man's wrist. Nobles flowed up the steps in rivers of silk and satin, their masks glittering under torchlight. Ravens and wolves and serpents, roses with thorns made of rubies, a lion with emeralds for eyes. Everyone who mattered was here tonight, everyone who could destroy you with a whisper. Cedric's hand found the small of her back again. Not gentle, never gentle, but steady. He guided her forward through the crowd, and people parted without him having to say a word. That was the Ashcroft name. That was what centuries of blood and brutality bought you. A path that cleared itself. Inside the ballroom, the air tasted like champagne and conspiracy. The emperor himself stood on a dais at the far end of the room, dressed in white and gold, his own mask a sun with rays that looked like they could cut flesh. Beside him, Empress Isolde wore midnight blue and diamonds, her face hidden behind a crescent moon. They watched the room the way predators watched prey. "You look nervous," Cedric murmured near her ear. "I'm fine," she said. "Lie better." His words stung because they were true. She could feel her pulse in her throat, could feel the weight of the silver raven mask pressing against her temples. It was beautiful, delicate metalwork shaped into feathers that looked real enough to fly, but it felt wrong, like wearing someone else's face. The Ashcroft family claimed a position near the center of the room. Duke Magnus Ashcroft, Cedric's uncle and the true patriarch of the dynasty, stood with his arms crossed over a barrel chest, his mask a skull painted gold. He was 63 and looked like he could break a man in half. Beside him, his wife Lady Octavia wore pearls and poison in equal measure, her mask a white swan with black eyes. Cedric's cousin, Lord Damien, leaned against a pillar with a glass of wine and a smirk that never quite left his face. His mask was a fox. Of course it was. Vivian, Magnus said without preamble. You wore the raven. I did, she said. Good. That was all. No explanation. No warmth. Magnus Ashcroft didn't deal in warmth. He dealt in control. The orchestra began a new piece, something slow and dangerous, the kind of music that made people lean closer and confess things they shouldn't. Cedric took her hand and led her onto the dance floor without asking. His palm was cool against hers, his grip firm. He moved the way he did everything, with precision that bordered on violence. Around them, other couples spun in careful circles, masks hiding expressions but not intent. Lord Tavian and his mistress danced too close. Countess Mirabelle watched her husband dance with someone half his age. Everywhere Vivian looked, she saw secrets wearing silk. You're quiet tonight, Cedric said. So are you. I'm always quiet. No, she said. You're always calculating. There's a difference. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Almost. The Duke of Ashcroft doesn't smile in public, he had told her once. Smiles are weaknesses. They tell people you're human. She wondered sometimes if he remembered how to be human anymore, if the title had burned it out of him. The song shifted tempo. Cedric spun her outward and pulled her back in, and for a moment they were close enough that she could see the gray in his eyes darken to something like smoke. He was handsome in the way sharp things are handsome, beautiful until you cut yourself on them. Magnus is planning something, he said quietly. Tonight. Don't react. Don't engage, just follow my lead. What kind of something? The kind that keeps us alive. Before she could ask what that meant, a voice cut through the music like a blade through silk. Duke Ashcroft, how lovely to see you among the living. The woman who appeared beside them wore a mask of crimson and black, a butterfly with wings sharp enough to slice, and a gown that looked like it cost more than a small army. Her dark hair was pinned with jewels that caught the light and threw it back like tiny knives. She was beautiful the way fires are beautiful, the kind of beauty that leaves nothing but ash. Lady Seraphina Voltaire. Cedric's hand tightened on Vivian's waist. Just slightly, just enough. Lady Voltaire, he said evenly. Still collecting rumors, I see. Someone has to, darling, she purred. Otherwise, how would anyone know the truth? She turned her attention to Vivian, and her smile widened. And this must be the famous Duchess Vivian, the woman who appeared out of nowhere 2 years ago and married the most eligible bachelor in the empire. How romantic. Vivian felt ice slide down her spine. There was something in the way Seraphina said appeared, like she knew something, like she had been waiting. Thank you, Vivian said carefully. Tell me, Duchess, Seraphina continued, tilting her head like a curious bird. Do you ever wonder why the Duke chose you? A woman with no family, no title, no past. Cedric's jaw tightened. Seraphina, I only ask, Seraphina interrupted, because I've always been fascinated by mysteries. And you, my dear, are quite the mystery. She reached out as if to adjust the feather on Vivian's mask, and Cedric moved faster than Vivian had ever seen him move. His hand caught Seraphina's wrist midair, his grip iron. Don't, he said quietly. Seraphina's eyes gleamed. Touchy, aren't we? She pulled her hand free and stepped back, but her smile never faltered. Enjoy the dance, Duke. Duchess, I have a feeling it will be memorable. She disappeared into the crowd like smoke. Vivian's heart hammered. What was that? Nothing, Cedric said. That wasn't nothing. Drop it. His voice was flat, final. The conversation was over. They finished the dance in silence. When the music ended, Cedric escorted her off the floor and handed her a glass of champagne from a passing servant. She didn't drink it. She couldn't. Her hands were shaking. Around them, the masquerade continued. Laughter echoed off marble walls. Crystal clinked against crystal. Somewhere a woman laughed too loud, and somewhere else a man whispered something that made his companion's face go pale behind her mask. And then the lights dimmed. The Emperor stood and the room fell silent. Every head turned. every breath held. "Friends," the Emperor said, his voice carrying across the ballroom like thunder, "welcome to the 47th Imperial Masquerade. Tonight we celebrate the bonds that hold this empire together. Blood, loyalty, honor." He paused, and his gaze swept the room like a sword. "And tonight, we also remember that truth is the foundation upon which all great houses stand." Vivian felt Cedric go rigid beside her. The Emperor smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Let the unmasking begin." The room erupted into applause. The orchestra struck up again. Something faster now, something wild. Couples returned to the floor. Servants circulated with more champagne. The chandelier blazed brighter, and Lady Serafina Voltaire stepped directly into Vivian's path. She wasn't smiling anymore. "Duchess Vivian," she said loudly, loud enough that people nearby turned to look. "I have a question." Cedric moved to intercept, but Serafina was faster. She reached out, grabbed the edge of Vivian's silver raven mask, and tore it away before anyone could stop her. The mask fell. It hit the marble with a sound like breaking glass. Vivian stood frozen, exposed. The birthmark on her neck, small, crescent-shaped, impossible to hide, burned under the eyes of 200 people who suddenly couldn't look away. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a stone thrown into still water. Serafina's voice rang clear. "Tell me, Duchess, where did you get that mark?" Vivian couldn't speak, couldn't think. The room spun. "Because I've seen it before," Serafina continued, "on a portrait, in a burned estate 15 years ago." The crowd pressed closer. Whispers spread like wildfire. "That mark. The Thornfield family. Impossible. She can't be." Cedric grabbed Vivian's arm, but she barely felt it. Everything had narrowed to Serafina's face, to the triumph in her eyes. "You're not the Duke's lawful wife," Serafina said softly. "You're the missing daughter of House Thornfield, the family that was destroyed, the fortune that was stolen." She leaned closer. "And someone in this room murdered your parents to make sure you'd never come back." The ballroom exploded into chaos. "Chaka." Cedric pulled her through the crowd with a grip that would leave bruises. People shouted questions. Hands reached out. Masks turned toward her like 100 accusing faces. She stumbled, and he hauled her forward, his expression carved from stone. "Move," he snarled at anyone who got too close. They reached a side corridor, and he shoved open a door, some kind of sitting room, dark except for moonlight through tall windows. He pulled her inside and slammed the door shut behind them, locked it, pressed his back against it like he expected a mob. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Vivian said, "Is it true?" Her voice sounded small, broken. Cedric didn't answer. "Is it true?" He closed his eyes. "I didn't know, not at first." Oh God. Her legs gave out. She sank onto a velvet chair, her hands shaking so hard she had to press them against her thighs. The birthmark on her neck throbbed like it was alive. "When did you find out?" she whispered. 6 months ago. 6. I was protecting you. By lying to me. By keeping you alive." He crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt in front of her, his hands on her knees, his face level with hers. His eyes were wild, desperate. "Listen to me," he said. "House Thornfield was destroyed because your father discovered something he wasn't supposed to know. Something about my family. About Magnus. If anyone found out you survived, they would have killed you. I married you to hide you, to keep you safe." She stared at him. "You married me as a cover. I married you because you were in danger, and I—" He stopped, clenched his jaw. "You what?" she demanded. He looked away. "It doesn't matter now. It matters to me." He stood abruptly, running a hand through his hair. Outside, she could hear shouting. Footsteps in the corridor. Someone pounded on the door. "Duke Ashcroft, open this door immediately." "Guards, Imperial guards." Cedric turned back to her, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked afraid. "Vivian," he said quietly, "I need you to trust me. Just for tonight." "Can you do that?" She wanted to scream, wanted to hit him, wanted to demand every truth he'd ever kept from her. But she also saw something in his face that stopped her. Regret. Real, raw regret. "Fine," she said. He exhaled. Thank you. He unlocked the door. 3 guards stood outside, their hands on their swords. Duke Ashcroft, the lead guard said. The Emperor requests your presence, and the Duchess. Immediately. Of course, Cedric said smoothly. Lead the way. They were escorted back through the palace like prisoners. The masquerade was still going, music still played, people still danced, but everything felt wrong now. Off-key, like a song played by someone who'd forgotten the melody. The Emperor waited in a private chamber off the main hall. He had removed his mask, and without it, he looked older, harder. His eyes were the color of winter. Duke Ashcroft, he said. Explain. Cedric bowed. Your Majesty, my wife, and is not your wife, the Emperor interrupted. If Lady Voltaire's claim is true. It isn't, Cedric said flatly. Then prove it. Silence. Vivian stepped forward. She didn't know what made her do it. Anger, maybe, or something deeper. Something that had been sleeping for 15 years and had just woken up screaming. I don't know who I am, she said, but I know who I'm not. I'm not a liar, and I'm not afraid of the truth. The Emperor studied her. Then you won't mind if we investigate. Investigate what? Your past, Duchess. Your family. Your claim to the Ashcroft name. He gestured, and a servant appeared carrying a leather-bound ledger. The Emperor opened it and turned it toward her. House Thornfield, he said, was granted a royal seal 15 years ago. A seal that carried certain privileges, including the right to audit imperial accounts. Vivian's heart stopped. Your father, the Emperor continued, used that seal. And 3 days before his estate burned, he sent a letter to this palace, a letter claiming he had found evidence of treason, embezzlement, murder. He closed the ledger. That letter was never opened, because your father died before anyone could verify his claims, and now, 15 years later, his daughter appears wearing the Ashcroft name. He leaned forward. Tell me, Duchess, do you think that's a coincidence? She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Cedric's hand found hers, squeezed once, a warning, or a promise. I think, Vivian said slowly, that someone wanted my family dead, and they wanted me to disappear. The Emperor smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Then we agree on something. He gestured to the guards. Take them back to the ballroom. I want everyone to see this. If the Ashcroft family has been hiding a traitor's daughter, the Empire deserves to know. Wait, Cedric said sharply. Your Majesty, I respectfully request... Denied. But... You're dismissed, Duke. The guards grabbed them. Cedric's hand tore away from hers, and she was pulled backward into the corridor, her heart screaming in her chest. They were marched back into the ballroom like criminals on display. The music stopped again. The crowd parted. And at the center of it all, standing beside Magnus Ashcroft and Lady Seraphina Voltaire, was a man Vivian had never seen before. He was tall, pale, thin in a way that looked like sickness. His mask was a serpent, black and silver, and when he looked at her, his eyes were empty. That's her, he said quietly. Magnus stepped forward. Who is? The girl. The Thornfield child. I was there the night the estate burned. I saw her. The room went deathly silent. You're lying, Cedric said. The man turned toward him. Am I, Duke? Or are you? He reached into his coat and pulled out something small. A locket, gold, engraved with a crest Vivian didn't recognize. This belonged to Eleanor Thornfield, the man said, the Duchess's mother. I took it from her body after the fire. He opened it. Inside was a portrait. A woman with dark hair and a birthmark on her neck. Vivian felt the world tilt. She looks just like you, the man said softly. Doesn't she? And then he smiled, and Vivian knew that whoever he was, he had been waiting 15 years for this moment. Just like Seraphina, just like Magnus, just like everyone in this room who had ever wanted the Ashcroft family destroyed. Cedric grabbed her hand again, held tight. Run, he whispered. What? When I move, you run. Cedric, trust me. And then he drove his elbow into the guard's throat, ripped the sword from his belt, and swung it in an arc that sent 2 men sprawling. Chaos erupted. People screamed, guards rushed forward. Magnus roared orders. Seraphina laughed. and Cedric shoved Vivian toward the door. Go! She ran. Behind her, steel clashed. Someone fired a pistol. Glass shattered. She didn't look back. Couldn't look back. She ran through corridors she didn't recognize, past portraits of dead emperors, under chandeliers that blazed like dying suns. She burst through a side door into the palace gardens. Rain had started again, cold and sharp. Her gown was soaked in seconds. Her slippers slipped on wet stone. And then someone grabbed her from behind, a hand over her mouth, an arm around her waist. She thrashed, but the grip was iron. Quiet, a voice hissed in her ear. Or I'll gut you right here. The man from the ballroom, the one with the locket. He dragged her backward into the shadows, and she felt cold steel press against her ribs. You should have stayed dead, he whispered, like your parents. Her parents. The word detonated in her chest like a bomb, and suddenly she wasn't Vivian Ashcroft anymore. She wasn't the Duchess. She wasn't Cedric's wife. She was just a girl who had lost everything and didn't even know it. The knife pressed harder. She felt blood, warm, wet. This is how you die, he said, just like them. And then Cedric appeared out of the rain like something from a nightmare. His sword took the man through the shoulder. The knife fell. The man screamed. Cedric yanked the blade free and kicked him to the ground, his face a mask of cold fury. He looked at Vivian. You hurt? She couldn't speak, could only stare at the blood on his coat, on his hands. Vivian, he said again, softer now. Are you hurt? She shook her head. Good. He turned back to the man on the ground, who was clutching his shoulder and gasping for air. Who sent you? Cedric demanded. The man laughed. Blood bubbled on his lips. You already know. Say it. He's your family, Duke. Your blood. Cedric's sword moved faster than thought. It stopped an inch from the man's throat. Say his name. Magnus, the man wheezed. Lord Magnus Ashcroft. He's the one who burned the Thornfield estate, who killed the parents, who stole the fortune. Cedric went very still. And you helped him, the man continued, grinning despite the blood. Didn't you, Duke? You knew. You've always known. Vivian felt something inside her shatter. Cedric, she whispered. He didn't look at her. The man kept talking, his voice wet and broken. He needed the Thornfield money to pay his debts, to keep the Ashcroft empire from collapsing, so he killed them, took everything. And then he found the girl, you, and he was going to kill you too. She took a step back, then another. But the Duke stopped him, the man said, looking at Cedric now. Didn't you? You said you'd handle it. You said you'd make sure she never remembered, never came back. He coughed. Blood sprayed. So you married her. You kept her close. You made her love you. Cedric's sword trembled. And all this time, the man whispered, you've been lying to her. Vivian's voice cracked. Cedric, tell me he's lying. Cedric finally looked at her, and his face said everything. Rain poured down between them. Thunder rumbled. Lightning split the sky. You knew, she said. You knew who I was. What happened to my family, and you kept me in the dark. I was protecting you, he said. No. She shook her head. You were protecting yourself. Vivian, my parents are dead because of your family, and you married me anyway. You slept beside me every night knowing your uncle murdered them. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Her voice echoed across the gardens, across the palace, across the empire that had taken everything from her. Cedric's sword lowered. Not because you wanted to, I know, the man on the ground rasped. Because Magnus ordered it. Because if you didn't, he'd kill you too. Cedric's eyes closed, and Vivian understood. He hadn't saved her. He'd saved himself. Footsteps echoed from the palace, guards, dozens of them. We need to go, Cedric said quietly. Don't touch me. Vivian, don't. She backed away, her chest heaving, her vision blurred with rain and tears and rage. And then something moved in the shadows behind Cedric, fast, silent, a figure in a gold skull mask. Magnus. Vivian screamed. Cedric spun, but Magnus was faster. His blade drove into Cedric's side, deep and brutal. Cedric gasped. Blood bloomed across his shirt. You always were weak, Magnus said calmly. Just like your brother." He twisted the knife. Cedric collapsed, and Vivian watched the man who had lied to her, who had protected her, who had destroyed her, fall to his knees in the rain. Magnus turned toward her. His mask glinted in the lightning. "Your turn," he said. He started forward, and somewhere deep inside Vivian, deeper than fear, deeper than grief, something woke up, something that remembered fire and screaming and parents who died protecting her, something that had been buried for 15 years. She didn't run. She picked up the knife the first man had dropped, and when Magnus reached for her, she drove it into his chest with everything she had left. He staggered, looked down at the blade, looked back at her. "You," he whispered, "you were supposed to stay dead." "I did," she said. And then she twisted the knife the way he'd twisted his. Magnus fell. Guards poured into the garden, shouts, orders, chaos, but Vivian didn't move. She stood in the rain with blood on her hands and a dead man at her feet, and all she could think was, "This is who I am, not a duchess, not a wife, a survivor." Behind her, Cedric coughed. She turned. He was still on his knees, one hand pressed to his side, blood seeping between his fingers. "Vivian," he rasped. "I'm sorry." She looked at him, at the man who had saved her by destroying her, who had loved her by lying to her. "I know," she said, and then the guards reached them, and the world collapsed into steel and shouting and the cold, hard truth that nothing would ever be the same again. Because the mask hadn't just fallen tonight. The Empire had. The guards didn't arrest her. That was the first sign something was wrong. They stood in a circle around Magnus's body while rain hammered the palace gardens, their swords drawn but not pointed at anyone. Their faces were blank behind their helmets, waiting. Like they'd been given orders that contradicted everything they were seeing. One of them, a captain with a scar across his jaw, finally spoke. "Take the Duke inside. Get a physician." Two guards moved towards Cedric. He was still on his knees, his hand pressed against the wound in his side, blood seeping through his fingers in slow pulses. He didn't fight when they hauled him up, didn't speak, just looked at Vivian with eyes that said everything his mouth couldn't. "I'm sorry, I tried. I failed." She looked away. The captain turned to her. "Duchess, the Emperor wants to see you. Not an arrest, an invitation," which meant the Emperor already knew what had happened here tonight, had maybe even planned it. Vivian's hands were still shaking, still covered in Magnus's blood. The knife lay in the mud beside his body, and she had the sudden insane urge to pick it up again, to feel the weight of it, to remember that she was capable of killing when killing was the only option left. But she didn't. She folded her hands in front of her like a lady, like a duchess, like someone who hadn't just driven a blade into a man's chest and watched the light go out of his eyes. "Lead the way," she said. Her voice didn't shake. That surprised her. They walked back through the palace corridors, past walls lined with portraits of dead emperors and empresses who had survived worse nights than this. The masquerade was over. Guests were being escorted out by silent guards, their masks removed, their faces pale and shocked. Vivian saw Lady Serafina Voltaire standing near the entrance, her crimson butterfly mask dangling from her hand. She was smiling. Of course she was. Their eyes met for just a second. Serafina mouthed two words, "Thank you." And Vivian understood. Serafina hadn't exposed her to destroy the Ashcroft family. She'd exposed her to force Magnus into the open, to make him act, to give Vivian a reason to kill him. Everything tonight had been a trap, and Vivian had been the bait. The Emperor's private chamber was smaller than she expected. No gold, no marble, just dark wood and leather chairs and a fire crackling in a stone hearth. The Emperor stood with his back to the flames, his mask finally removed, his face lined with age and something harder. Experience, the kind that came from surviving decades of court intrigue. "Sit," he said. She sat. The chair was too soft. Her dress was soaked through, clinging to her skin like a second layer of cold. She could still feel Magnus's blood drying on her palms. The Emperor poured 2 glasses of wine from a crystal decanter, handed her one. She didn't drink it. "You killed Lord Magnus Ashcroft," he said. Not a question. "Yes." "Why?" "Because he tried to kill me, and because he murdered my parents 15 years ago." The Emperor nodded slowly. as if she'd just confirmed something he already knew. Do you have proof? A dying man's confession, a locket, a birthmark. Take your pick. Not enough for a trial. I don't want a trial, she said. I want the truth. The emperor smiled. It was a tired smile, the kind that came from hearing the same demand for decades and knowing truth was the one thing empires couldn't afford. The truth, he said, is that Magnus Ashcroft was a monster. But he was a useful monster. He kept the northern provinces in line. He funded half the imperial army. He turned the Ashcroft fortune into a weapon the empire could wield. So you let him murder my family. I didn't know about your family until tonight. Liar. The word hung in the air between them like smoke. The emperor's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened around his glass. Careful, Duchess. I'm not a duchess, Vivian said. You just said so yourself. I'm the daughter of traitors, the girl who should have died in a fire. Your father wasn't a traitor. She blinked. What? The emperor set down his glass, walked to a desk in the corner and opened a drawer, pulled out a sealed letter. The wax was cracked and yellow with age. This arrived 15 years ago, he said. 3 days before the Thornfield estate burned. I never opened it. I was advised not to. By Magnus. By people who thought the empire's stability was more important than one man's accusations. He held out the letter. She took it. Her hands were shaking again. Open it, he said. She broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in tight, precise handwriting. Her father's handwriting. She didn't remember his face anymore. Didn't remember his voice. But she remembered this. The way his letters curved. The way he pressed too hard on certain words when he was angry. The letter was addressed to the emperor, and it listed names, dates, transactions, evidence of embezzlement stretching back 20 years, money siphoned from imperial coffers into private accounts, bribes paid to judges, blackmail used against rival houses, and at the center of it all, Magnus Ashcroft. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the name at the bottom of the list. The person Magnus had been paying, the person who had helped him hide it all. Emperor Matthias's younger brother, Prince Aldrich. Vivienne looked up. Your brother? The emperor's face was stone. My late brother. He died of a sudden illness 2 years after your father sent this letter, suddenly. The emperor said nothing. Vivienne read the letter again, slower this time, and she saw it. The real reason her family had burned. Not because her father had found evidence of embezzlement, but because he'd found evidence that the imperial family itself was corrupt, that the emperor's own blood had been stealing from the throne. You killed him, she said quietly. Prince Aldrich. You had him poisoned. I did what was necessary, just like Magnus. No. The emperor's voice was sharp now, hard. Magnus killed for greed. I killed to save the empire. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. He took the letter back, held it over the fire. The paper caught instantly, curling and blackening until there was nothing left but ash. Your father was a good man, the emperor said. He believed in justice, in truth, in all the things empires claim to value but can't afford to practice. And he paid for it. So did my mother. Yes. And I was supposed to pay for it too. The emperor turned to face her fully. But you didn't. You survived. And tonight you proved you're stronger than the people who tried to bury you, by murdering someone in your garden, by doing what needed to be done. He poured another glass of wine. This time he drank it himself. Vivienne, he said, I'm going to offer you a choice. The first real choice you've had since the night your parents died. She waited. You can walk away, he continued. I'll give you money, a new name, a new life far from the capital. You'll be safe, comfortable, and you'll never have to think about the Ashcroft family again. Or you stay. You take your place as the surviving heir of House Thornfield. You reclaim your family's fortune and title, and you help me destroy what's left of the Ashcroft empire. Vivienne's heart hammered. Why would you do that? Because Magnus wasn't working alone. The emperor's eyes were cold now, ice cold. He had allies, people in this palace who helped him hide his crimes, people who are still here tonight, watching, waiting to see if the empire will fall. He leaned forward. I need someone I can trust, someone who has nothing to lose, someone who wants the same thing I want. which is the truth. The word landed between them like a stone dropped into deep water. Vivian looked at the fire, at the ash that used to be her father's last words, at the blood still drying on her hands. If I stay, she said slowly, I want something in return. Name it. I want to know everything, every lie, every secret, every person who helped Magnus. I want their names, their crimes, all of it. Done. And I want Cedric. The Emperor raised an eyebrow. The Duke? Yes. He's guilty too. He knew what Magnus did. He married you under false pretenses. I know, she said, but he also saved my life tonight, and he's the only person left who knows where Magnus hid the evidence. What evidence? The real ledgers. The ones that prove Magnus wasn't just embezzling. He was selling imperial secrets to foreign powers, weapons shipments, troop movements, everything. The Emperor went very still. How do you know that? Because the man in the garden told me, before he died. He said Magnus kept records of everything. Insurance, he called it, in case he ever needed leverage against the throne. Where are they? She met his eyes. That's what I need Cedric for. The Emperor studied her. Then he smiled. It wasn't a kind smile, but it was real. You're dangerous, he said. Your father would be proud. My father's dead, so is Magnus. They looked at each other for a long moment. Two people who had both killed to survive, who had both learned that truth was a luxury and survival was a war. Fine, the Emperor said. You can have the Duke. But if he betrays you, if he runs, if he lies, if he so much as looks at you wrong, I'll have him executed. Understood? Understood. Good. The Emperor gestured to the door. Now get out. You look like hell. They brought Cedric to her an hour later. He was in a guest chamber on the 3rd floor, stripped to the waist while a physician stitched the wound in his side. The blade had gone deep but missed anything vital. Lucky, the physician said. Another inch, and he'd be dead. Vivian dismissed the physician and locked the door behind him. Cedric watched her from the bed. His face was pale, his jaw tight with pain. The stitches pulled at his skin every time he breathed. You should be resting, he said. So should you. I've had worse. Liar. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. She crossed the room and sat in a chair beside the bed, close enough to see the sweat on his forehead, the way his hands gripped the sheets. He was in more pain than he was letting on. Of course he was. The Emperor gave me a choice, she said. Cedric's eyes sharpened. What kind of choice? Walk away or stay? Build a new life or destroy the old one? And you chose? I chose to stay. He exhaled slowly. Then you're braver than I am. Or stupider. Maybe both. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was starting to lighten. Dawn was coming whether they were ready or not. Tell me about my parents, Vivian said. Cedric closed his eyes. I never met them. But you know what happened? Yes. Tell me. He was quiet for a long time. Then, your father was an auditor, the kind who actually looked at the books instead of taking bribes to ignore them. He found discrepancies in the Ashcroft accounts, started asking questions, and Magnus killed him for it. Magnus tried to buy him off first, offered him money, power, a seat on the Imperial Council. Your father refused, so Magnus had him killed. And my mother? Wrong place, wrong time. Vivian's throat tightened. And me? You were supposed to die too. But the fire spread faster than Magnus planned. By the time his men reached your room, you were already gone. Where did I go? Cedric opened his eyes. A maid smuggled you out, took you to an orphanage in the lower city, changed your name, told everyone your parents died of fever. What was my name? My real name. Alara. Alara Thornfield. The name echoed in her chest like something she'd lost and forgotten. Alara. It felt right and wrong at the same time, like a dress that used to fit but didn't anymore. How did you find me? She asked. I didn't. Cedric shifted on the bed, wincing. Magnus did. 6 months ago. One of his spies recognized your birthmark. He was going to have you killed. I convinced him to let me handle it, by marrying me. Yes. Why? Because, Cedric said quietly, I didn't want another innocent person to die for my family's sins. Noble. Practical. Same thing. No. He looked at her. It's not. Then what's the difference? Noble means you do the right thing because it's right. Practical means you do it because it's the only way to survive. And which one were you? He didn't answer. Vivian leaned forward. I need to know something, Cedric, and I need you to tell me the truth. All right. Did you love me? Even a little? His jaw tightened. Does it matter? Yes. He looked away, looked at the window, at the dawn breaking over the Capitol. I didn't want to, he said finally. I told myself it was just a cover, just a way to keep you safe and keep Magnus off my back. But somewhere along the way it stopped being a lie. So you did. Yes. She didn't know what she'd expected to feel. Relief, anger, something. But all she felt was tired. I can't forgive you, she said. I know, but I can use you. His eyes snapped back to hers. What? The Emperor wants the Ashcroft Empire destroyed, and I want the people who killed my family to pay. That includes your allies, your business partners, everyone who helped Magnus. Cedric's expression hardened. You want me to betray my own house? You already did, the night you married me. That's different. How? Because I was trying to save you, and now I'm trying to save myself. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. Cedric stared at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked afraid. Not of death, of her. What do you want? He asked quietly. The ledgers, the real ones, the ones Magnus kept as insurance. I don't know where they are. Yes, you do, I swear. Don't lie to me, Cedric. Not now. Not after everything. He closed his eyes again, took a breath that rattled in his chest. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. The Ashcroft estate. In the library. There's a safe behind the portrait of my grandfather. The ledgers are inside. What's the combination? He told her. 6 numbers. She committed them to memory. If those ledgers get out, Cedric said, they'll destroy more than just the Ashcroft family. Half the noble houses in the Empire are implicated. Judges, generals, even members of the Imperial Council. Good. Vivian. They deserve it. And what about the innocent people caught in the middle? The servants, the guards, the families who had nothing to do with Magnus's crimes. She stood. Then they should have chosen better employers. She walked to the door, unlocked it. Wait, Cedric said. She turned. He was sitting up now, his hand pressed to his side, his face twisted with pain and something deeper, desperation. If you do this, he said, there's no going back. The Empire will tear itself apart. People will die. The power vacuum will be catastrophic. I know. And you're willing to live with that? She looked at him. At the man who had saved her by lying to her, who had loved her by destroying her, who had spent 2 years pretending to be something he wasn't. The people who killed my parents lived with worse, she said. I think I'll manage. She left. Walked. The Ashcroft estate stood on the edge of the Capitol like a monument to everything the Empire pretended to be. Grand. Elegant. Built on blood and lies. Vivian arrived at dawn with an Imperial escort. The servants were waiting at the entrance, their faces pale and confused. No one had told them their master was dead yet. They would find out soon enough. I need access to the library, Vivian told the head butler. The Duke's library is private, my lady. Not anymore. She walked past him before he could argue. The guards followed. The butler sputtered protests that no one listened to. The library was on the 2nd floor, a cavernous room lined with books no one had read in decades. The portrait of Cedric's grandfather hung above the fireplace, an old man with cold eyes and a mouth like a knife wound. Vivian pulled the painting aside. The safe was exactly where Cedric said it would be. She entered the combination. The door clicked open. Inside were 3 leather-bound ledgers and a stack of letters tied with black ribbon. She pulled them out carefully, her heart pounding. The ledgers were heavy, real, the kind of weight that came from years of accumulated sins. She opened the first one. Names, dates, transactions. Everything the Emperor had suspected, and more. Magnus hadn't just embezzled. He'd sold military intelligence to foreign powers, blackmailed judges into throwing cases, bribed imperial officials to ignore border incursions, and every transaction was documented. Every bribe, every betrayal, every crime. The letters were worse. They were correspondence between Magnus and his allies, proof that the conspiracy went deeper than anyone had imagined. Members of the Imperial Council, high-ranking military officers, even a distant cousin of the Emperor himself, all of them complicit, all of them guilty. Vivian felt something cold settle in her chest, something hard and sharp and unstoppable. This was power, real power, the kind that could topple dynasties. "Burn it," one of the guards said quietly. She looked at him. "What?" "Burn it. Pretend you never found it. Walk away." "Why would I do that?" "Because if you don't," the guard said, "the empire will collapse, and when it does, thousands of people will die. Maybe millions." "Good." The guard's eyes widened. "You don't mean that, don't I?" She closed the ledger, held it against her chest, felt the weight of it, the truth of it. "My parents died because someone decided their lives were less important than the empire's stability," she said. "Well, now it's my turn to decide, and I choose them." The guard opened his mouth, closed it. He had no argument. None of them did. She walked out of the library with the ledgers in her arms and the guard's warning ringing in her ears. Outside, the sun was rising. The capital spread out below the estate in a tangle of rooftops and smoke and lives that didn't know they were about to change forever. Vivian didn't feel guilty. She felt something else, something colder. Relief. Because for the first time in 15 years, she wasn't running anymore. She was the one they'd be running from. Nick. The Emperor read the ledgers in silence. Vivian stood in his private chamber and watched his face change as he turned each page. Shock. Anger. Something that looked like grief. When he finished, he set them down carefully, like they might explode. "This is," he said slowly, "the most dangerous thing I've ever seen." "Good. You understand what this means." "Yes. Half the Empire's leadership is implicated here. If I act on this, if I arrest these people, the entire structure collapses." "Then let it collapse." The Emperor looked at her. "You're serious?" "I'm tired of pretending," she said. "Tired of letting people get away with murder because it's convenient. Tired of being told my life didn't matter because the Empire needed stability. Your life did matter. Then prove it. Arrest them. All of them." The Emperor stood, walked to the window, looked out at the capital. "If I do this," he said quietly, "we'll have civil war. The noble houses won't accept it. They'll rebel. Let them. People will die, Vivian. People are already dying. They're just dying quietly, in ways we don't have to see." He turned to face her. "You want revenge. I want justice." "They're not the same thing. Close enough." They stared at each other. Two people standing on the edge of something vast and terrible, a choice that would define the Empire for generations. Finally, the Emperor smiled. It was a sad smile, a tired smile. "Your father would have said the same thing," he said. "Then maybe you should have listened to him. Maybe I should have." He picked up the ledgers again, held them like weapons. "All right," he said, "we'll do it your way. I'll issue the arrest warrants tonight. By dawn, half the Imperial Council will be in chains, and the other half will be dead or fled." She nodded. "Good." "Vivian," the Emperor said, "once we start this, we can't stop it. Do you understand that?" "Yes." "And you're prepared for what comes next?" She thought about her parents, about the fire, about 15 years of not knowing who she was. "I'm prepared," she said. The Emperor gestured to the door. "Then go. I have work to do." She left him standing in the golden light of morning, holding the evidence that would destroy an empire. And she didn't look back. Idam. Cedric was gone by the time she returned to the guest chamber. The bed was empty. The window open. A note on the pillow written in his precise handwriting. "I'm sorry for everything, but I can't watch you burn the world. Not even for justice. See." She crumpled the note, threw it in the fire. Let him run. Let him hide. It didn't matter anymore. She had what she needed. That night, the arrests began. Imperial guards swept through the capital like a plague. They dragged nobles from their beds, pulled judges from their chambers, arrested military officers mid-command. By morning, the imperial prison was full. By noon, the riots started. Protesters filled the streets, Some demanded the prisoners be released. Others demanded they be executed immediately. The city tore itself apart along lines of loyalty and rage, and Vivian watched it all from the palace balcony with the emperor at her side. "This is what you wanted," he said. "Yes." "Do you regret it?" She thought about that. About the fires burning in the lower city, about the blood in the streets, about the empire collapsing under the weight of its own corruption. "No," she said. "I don't." The emperor nodded. "Then you're stronger than I am, or colder. Maybe both." They stood in silence and watched the empire burn. And somewhere in the smoke and chaos, Vivian Ashcroft, Alara Thornfield, whoever she was now, felt something she hadn't felt in 15 years. Free. The empire burned for 3 days before Vivian realized she had made a mistake. Not a small mistake. Not the kind you could fix with apologies or bribes or careful political maneuvering. The kind of mistake that killed thousands of people and left a capital city choking on its own smoke. She stood on the palace balcony and watched another fire bloom in the merchant quarter. Orange and hungry. The screams carried all the way up to where she stood, thin and distant, like the cries of birds. "How many dead so far?" she asked. The emperor stood beside her, his face carved from stone. 432. That we know of. And the riots? Spreading. The northern districts are in open rebellion. The southern gate has been breached twice. We're losing control. Good. The word came out flat, empty. She didn't feel triumphant anymore. She didn't feel anything. The emperor looked at her. "You don't mean that, don't I?" But her voice cracked on the last word, and they both heard it. The truth was settling into her bones like poison. She had wanted justice. She had wanted the people who killed her parents to pay. But what she had gotten instead was chaos. Blood. A city tearing itself apart because she had decided her pain mattered more than their lives. The arrests had triggered something she hadn't anticipated. The noble houses hadn't just rolled over and accepted their fate. They had fought back, rallied their private armies, turned the capital into a war zone. And the common people, the ones she thought she was helping, were the ones dying in the streets. "We need to stop this," the emperor said quietly. "How?" "Release the prisoners. Issue a pardon. Blame it all on Magnus and move on." Vivian's hands tightened on the balcony railing. "That's not justice." "No, it's survival. Same thing." "No," he said. "It's not." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that they had come too far to turn back now, that her parents' deaths had to mean something. But she looked at the fires burning across the capital and couldn't find the words. A guard appeared in the doorway behind them. "Your Majesty, there's been another development." The emperor turned. "What kind of development?" The guard's face was pale. "Duke Cedric Ashcroft has returned to the capital. He's requesting an audience." Vivian's heart stopped. "No," the emperor said immediately. "He's a fugitive. Arrest him." "Wait," Vivian said. "Your Majesty." "I said wait." She pushed past the guard and into the palace. Her feet moved before her mind could catch up. Down corridors, past shocked servants, through doors she didn't remember opening. Cedric was waiting in the throne room. He looked terrible. His coat was stained with mud and blood. His face was gray with exhaustion. The wound in his side had reopened. She could see fresh blood seeping through his shirt. He stood in the center of the room like a man awaiting execution, his hands loose at his sides, his eyes locked on hers. "You came back," she said. "I had to." "Why?" "Because you're destroying everything." The words hit her like a slap. She crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed his collar. Her hands shook with rage or grief or something she couldn't name. "You don't get to lecture me," she hissed. "You lied to me for 2 years. You knew what your family did and you said nothing. I know. You married me to save yourself. I know. And now you come back here and tell me I'm the problem?" "Yes." She shoved him backward. He stumbled but didn't fall, just stood there and took it, like he deserved it, like he wanted it. The emperor entered the throne room with a dozen guards at his back. Their swords were already drawn. "Arrest him," the emperor said. "No," Vivian said. "That's not a request, and I'm not asking for permission." She stepped between Cedric and the guards. Her pulse hammered in her ears. The emperor's eyes narrowed. Move, he said. Listen to him first. Why? Because he wouldn't have come back if he didn't have something worth dying for. The Emperor studied her. Then he gestured to the guards. Lower your weapons, but don't leave. The guards obeyed, barely. Their hands stayed on their hilts. Cedric took a breath. It rattled in his chest. You want to know why I came back? Because I've been to the northern provinces. I've seen what's happening out there. We know what's happening, the Emperor said. Rebellion, riots, nothing we can't handle. It's not rebellion. Cedric's voice was hard now, sharp. It's preparation for war. What are you talking about? The noble houses you arrested weren't just corrupt. They were the only thing holding the northern territories together. Without them, the provincial governors are declaring independence, raising armies, making alliances with foreign powers. He pulled a folded letter from his coat and threw it on the floor at the Emperor's feet. That's from the governor of Kelmar. He's already in talks with the Varenth Empire. They're promising military support in exchange for access to our northern ports. The Emperor's face went white. He picked up the letter. Read it. His hands started to shake. If Varenth gets a foothold in our territory, Cedric continued, the civil war becomes an invasion, and we'll lose. The throne room went silent. The only sound was the distant crackle of fires still burning across the capital. Vivian felt something cold settle in her stomach. This is my fault. Not just yours, Cedric said. But yes, partly. How do we fix it? You can't. The words landed like stones. The damage is done, Cedric said. The noble houses are scattered. The military is divided. Half the Imperial Council is in prison or dead. There's no authority left to hold the Empire together. Then what do we do? Vivian's voice cracked. Just let it fall apart? Cedric looked at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw something in his eyes that looked like pity. We rebuild, he said, from the ground up, but it's going to cost everything we have left. The Emperor set the letter down carefully. What are you proposing? A bargain. Release the prisoners, restore their titles and lands, offer amnesty to anyone who swears loyalty to the throne. That's surrendering, Vivian said. That's surviving. And my parents? The people who murdered them just walk free? Cedric's jaw tightened. Yes. No. She turned to the Emperor. You can't do this. You promised me justice. I promised you the truth, the Emperor said quietly. This is the truth. Justice is a luxury, and right now we can't afford it. So what? I just let them win? You let the Empire live. The room spun. Vivian's hands curled into fists. She wanted to scream, wanted to hit something, wanted to tear the throne room apart with her bare hands. But she looked at Cedric's face, at the exhaustion there, the resignation, the knowledge that they had both already lost. There's more, isn't there? She said. Cedric nodded slowly. The northern governors aren't the only ones making moves. Someone inside the palace has been feeding information to the rebels. Tactical data, guard rotation, supply lines. A spy. Yes. Do you know who? No, but I know they've been operating for years, long before Magnus died. Whoever it is, they're close to the throne, close enough to access restricted documents. The Emperor's expression darkened. That's impossible. Everyone in my inner circle has been vetted. Has it occurred to you, Cedric said carefully, that maybe the vetting process itself was compromised? The Emperor went very still. What are you saying? I'm saying Magnus wasn't the only traitor in your court, and whoever's left is using this chaos to finish what he started. The throne room doors burst open. Lady Serafina Voltaire strode in with a smile that could cut glass. She wore black and silver, her crimson butterfly mask replaced with something simpler, something that looked almost humble. Almost. Your Majesty, she said. Forgive the interruption, but I have information you need to hear. The Emperor's hand moved to the sword at his belt. This had better be important, Lady Voltaire. Oh, it is. Serafina's eyes gleamed. I know who the spy is. The room held its breath. It's Lord Tavian, she said. The Imperial Chancellor. He's been selling secrets to the northern governors for 5 years. Lies, a voice said from the shadows. Lord Tavian stepped into the light. He was 60 years old with white hair and a face that looked like old leather. He'd been the Emperor's most trusted advisor for 2 decades. The man who drafted laws, who negotiated treaties, who held the empire together when no one else could. He looked at Serafina with something close to amusement. "She's lying," he said calmly, "and I can prove it." "Then do it," the emperor said. Tavian pulled a ledger from his coat. Not one of Magnus's, something newer. He opened it and held it up. "These are Lady Voltaire's financial records," he said. "Over the past 3 years, she's received payments from 16 different foreign governments, including Varenth." Serafina's smile didn't falter. "Those are donations for my charitable work." "You don't do charitable work. I'm a complicated woman." "You're a traitor." Serafina laughed. It was a bright, terrible sound. "Oh, Tavian, you always were dramatic." She looked at the emperor. "I'll make this simple," she said. "Tavian and I have both been selling information. The difference is, I was doing it to survive. He was doing it to destroy you." Tavian's face went hard. "That's a lie." "Is it?" Serafina tilted her head. "Then explain why you blocked the investigation into Magnus's finances. Why you delayed the arrests for 3 days. Why you've been advising the emperor to release the prisoners and restore the noble houses. Because it's the right thing to do. Or because your allies are in those prison cells, and you need them free to continue your little coup." Tavian lunged for her. The guards caught him before he'd taken 2 steps. He struggled, his face twisted with rage. "She's manipulating you," he shouted. "All of you. She's the one working with Varenth. She's the one who wants the empire to fall." Serafina just smiled, and Vivian realized with a sick lurch in her stomach that she had no idea who was telling the truth. The emperor looked between them. His hand was still on his sword. His face was a mask of barely controlled fury. "I want both of you in chains," he said. "Now." "Wait," Cedric said. Everyone turned. "There's a way to know for sure," Cedric continued. "The spy has been feeding information for years, which means there's a pattern, a trail. We just need to find it." "And how do you propose we do that?" the emperor asked. "Check the guard logs. Cross-reference them with the dates of the leaks. Whoever the spy is, they had to access restricted areas to get the information. There'll be a record." The emperor gestured to one of the guards. "Get me the logs. All of them, going back 5 years." The guard left. The throne room settled into tense silence. Vivian watched Serafina and Tavian. Both of them looked calm. Too calm. Like they'd already planned for this. The guard returned with a stack of ledgers. The emperor spread them across a table and started scanning. His finger traced down page after page, his expression growing darker with each line. Finally, he stopped. "Here," he said. "Access to the military archive 2 days before the northern border was breached." He looked up. "The log says you, Tavian. Your signature, your seal." Tavian's face went pale. "I was conducting routine research for a treaty negotiation." 3 days later, the emperor interrupted. "Someone accessed the financial records. Again, your signature. That's my job." And 4 days after that, secret guard rotations were leaked to the rebels. Care to explain that? Tavian's mouth opened, closed. He had no answer. Serafina laughed softly. "Told you." The emperor's hand tightened on his sword. "Lord Tavian, you are under arrest for high treason. You'll be tried and executed within the week." Tavian didn't fight. He just stood there as the guards clamped irons around his wrists. His face had gone blank. Empty. "I was trying to save the empire," he said quietly. "Not destroy it. By selling us out? By ending the corruption? By forcing change? The empire was rotting from the inside. Someone had to cut out the disease, even if it killed the patient." Tavian looked at the emperor, and for the first time, Vivian saw something in his eyes that wasn't calculation or ambition. It was grief. "The patient was already dead," Tavian said. "I was just preparing the funeral. The guards dragged him away." Serafina watched him go with a satisfied smile. "Well," she said, "that was exciting." The emperor turned to her. "Don't think you're off the hook, Lady Voltaire. You admitted to taking foreign money. For survival. Not treason. There's a difference." "Is there?" Serafina's smile sharpened. "You tell me, Your Majesty. How many compromises have you made to keep your throne? How many lies have you told? How many people have you killed?" The emperor's face was stone. "Get out." "Gladly." She turned and walked toward the door, then stopped. looked back at Vivian. You should thank me, she said. I gave you what you wanted. The truth. The people responsible. Everything. You destroyed the capital. No, darling, you did that. I just held up the mirror. She left. The throne room fell silent again. The fires outside painted the walls in shades of orange and red. Vivian sank into a chair. Her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. Everything felt wrong. Hollow, like she'd won a battle but lost something she couldn't name. Cedric sat beside her, winced as the movement pulled at his wound. We need to stop the riots, he said quietly, before the entire city burns. How? Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. How do we fix this? We don't. We just try to contain it. The Emperor turned to face them both. He looked older suddenly, like the last 3 days had aged him a decade. Release the prisoners, he said. Issue the pardons. Restore the noble houses. Vivian's head snapped up. No, it's the only way. I won't let them walk free. Not after everything. They're already free, the Emperor said. We arrested their bodies, not their power. Their allies are still out there. Their money. Their influence. Keeping them in prison just makes them martyrs. So we just surrender? We survive. And then we rebuild. Slowly. Carefully. Without burning the empire to the ground. Vivian looked at Cedric. Tell him he's wrong. Cedric met her eyes and said nothing. Because he wasn't wrong. And they all knew it. You wanted justice, the Emperor said quietly. But justice requires a foundation. Laws, order, trust. We don't have any of that right now. All we have is chaos. He walked to the window, looked out at the burning city. Your parents died because someone decided the empire's stability mattered more than their lives, he said. And now you're learning the same lesson. Sometimes survival requires sacrifice. Sometimes it requires letting guilty people go free. He turned back to her. I'm sorry, Vivian, but if you want this empire to survive, you have to let your vengeance go. The words hung in the air like smoke. Vivian felt something break inside her, something she'd been holding together for 15 years, since the night her parents died, since the night she lost her name. Fine, she said. Do it. Vivian, I said do it. Release them. Pardon them. Let them all walk free. Her voice was empty, dead. The Emperor nodded, gestured to a guard. Draft the pardons. I want them issued by dawn. The guard left. Cedric put a hand on Vivian's shoulder. She shook it off. Don't touch me. I'm sorry. You're not sorry. You're relieved. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. She stood. Her hands were shaking again. Her vision blurred. I did everything right, she said. I found the evidence. I exposed the corruption. I fought for the truth. And I still lost. You didn't lose, Cedric said quietly. You just learned that winning looks different than you thought. No. She looked at him. At the Emperor. At the throne room that felt more like a tomb. I learned that the Empire doesn't care about truth. It cares about survival. And it'll sacrifice anything to get it, including me. Vivian. She walked toward the door. Where are you going? The Emperor called after her. Away. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. She left them standing in the throne room and walked back through the palace. Past servants who looked at her with something between pity and fear. Past guards who stepped aside like she carried a plague. She walked until she reached her chambers, locked the door, stood in the center of the room and finally let herself feel it. The rage, the grief, the crushing weight of knowing she had destroyed everything for nothing. She had wanted to avenge her parents, had wanted to make their deaths mean something, but all she had done was add more bodies to the pile, 432 dead, and counting, because of her. A knock at the door. Go away, she said. The door opened anyway. Serafina Voltaire stood in the doorway. Her smile was gone. In its place was something that looked almost like sympathy. You should have listened to me, she said. Get out! I tried to warn you. The night of the masquerade. I told you the Empire doesn't care about justice. You used me. Yes, Serafina stepped into the room. But I also saved you by destroying everything, by showing you the truth. That revenge is a poison, and the only way to survive it is to let it kill something inside you first. She closed the door behind her. I know what you're feeling right now, she said quietly. I felt the same way once. When I realized the people who killed my family were never going to pay. When I learned that the Empire protects its own. Vivienne looked up. Your family? Serafina nodded. Murdered 20 years ago by a man who's still alive, still powerful, still untouchable. Who? Doesn't matter. What matters is I survived. And so will you. Vivienne laughed. It came out harsh and broken. I don't want to survive. I want them to pay. I know. Serafina sat beside her. But they won't. The Emperor will issue the pardons. The noble houses will return to power. And in 6 months, everyone will forget this ever happened. Then what was the point? The point, Serafina said, is that you're still alive. And so are the people you care about. That's not nothing. It feels like nothing. I know. They sat in silence. Outside, the fires were starting to die. The riots were calming. The city was exhausting itself. There's something you should know, Serafina said after a moment. About Cedric. What about him? He didn't just come back to save the Empire. He came back to save you. Vivienne's throat tightened. What are you talking about? The wound in his side. It's worse than he's letting on. He should be dead. But he rode for 3 days straight to get here because he knew you were in danger. Danger from what? From yourself. The words settled like weights. He knew what this would do to you, Serafina continued. Knew you'd blame yourself for every death, every fire, every life destroyed, and he couldn't let you carry that alone. Vivienne's hands curled into fists. He should have let me. Probably, but he loves you too much to do that. Don't. It's true, whether you want it to be or not. Serafina stood, walked to the door, paused. The Empire took everything from both of us, she said, but we're still here. That means we won, even if it doesn't feel like it. She left, and Vivienne sat alone in her chambers with blood on her hands and ashes in her mouth, and the terrible knowledge that sometimes the only way to survive was to become something you hated. The door opened again. This time it was Cedric. He looked worse. The blood had soaked through his shirt completely now. His face was the color of old paper. He could barely stand. You need a physician, Vivienne said. Later, you're dying. Not yet. He crossed the room, sat beside her. His breathing was shallow and labored. I came to tell you something, he said. What? That you were right. About everything. The Empire is corrupt. The noble houses are poisonous. And your parents deserve justice. Then why did you stop me? Because justice without mercy is just another kind of tyranny, and you're better than that. Am I? Yes. He took her hand. His palm was cold. I've made a lot of mistakes, he said. Lying to you. Marrying you under false pretenses. Letting Magnus live as long as I did. But the one thing I never regretted was keeping you alive. Even though it cost you everything, especially because of that. He coughed. Blood flecked his lips. Cedric, I love you, he said. I know you can't forgive me. I know you probably hate me, but I need you to know that before what? Before I do what needs to be done. His eyes were steady, clear, and Vivienne saw it. The decision he'd already made, the choice that would cost him everything. No, she said, whatever you're planning, the Emperor's going to release the prisoners, restore the noble houses, let them walk free. I know, but he's not going to do it willingly. Someone has to force his hand. What are you talking about? Cedric smiled. It was sad and tired and final. I'm going to confess, he said, to everything, Magnus's crimes, the embezzlement, the murders, all of it. And I'm going to take the blame. You can't. The Empire needs a villain, someone to punish, someone whose execution will satisfy the mob and calm the riots. If I give them that, the Emperor can issue the pardons without looking weak. They'll kill you. I know. Cedric, well, it's already done. I sent a signed confession to the Imperial Court an hour ago. Vivienne felt the world tilt. You're lying. He pulled a folded paper from his coat. A copy of the confession. She took it with shaking hands. Read it. Every crime Magnus had committed, every bribe, every murder, every betrayal, all attributed to Cedric Ashcroft, the man who had saved her life by destroying his own. No, she whispered. I won't let you do this. You don't have a choice. Then I'll tell them the truth. I'll tell them it was Magnus, and they won't care. The mob wants blood. The Emperor needs stability. This gives them both. But you're innocent." "No," Cedric said quietly. "I'm not. I knew what Magnus was doing, and I didn't stop him. I married you under false pretenses. I let your parents' killer walk free for 2 years." He stood, swayed. She caught him before he fell. "I'm guilty of a lot of things," he said. "This is just the first time I'm paying for them. Cedric, please. Take care of the Empire," he said. "Make it better. Make it something worth saving." "How?" "I don't know, but you'll figure it out. You always do." He kissed her forehead. It felt like goodbye. And then the guards came through the door. They moved fast, efficient, like they'd done this 1,000 times before. "Duke Cedric Ashcroft," the captain said. "You are under arrest for high treason, conspiracy, and murder. Your execution is scheduled for dawn." Cedric didn't fight. He let them clamp the irons around his wrists, let them pull him toward the door. But he looked back at Vivian one last time, and his eyes said everything his mouth couldn't. "I'm sorry. I love you. Survive." Then he was gone, and Vivian collapsed to her knees in a room that suddenly felt too big and too empty and too full of everything she'd lost. Outside, the fires were dying. The Empire was stabilizing, and tomorrow, at dawn, they would execute the only person left who had tried to save her. Dawn came too fast. Vivian stood at her chamber window and watched the sky turn from black to gray to the color of old bruises. Somewhere below, in the bowels of the palace, Cedric was waiting to die. For crimes he didn't commit, for sins that belonged to a dead man. Because he had decided her life was worth more than his own. She should have felt something. Grief, rage, the kind of desperate panic that makes people do stupid things, but all she felt was cold. The kind of cold that settled into your bones and turned you into something other than human. Something that could make choices without flinching, without breaking. Maybe that was what survival looked like. Not strength, just the absence of feeling. The door opened behind her. She didn't turn. "You should eat something," a voice said. "Serafina." "Of course. I'm not hungry. You haven't slept either." "No." Serafina crossed the room and stood beside her. Together they watched the capital wake up. The fires had burned themselves out during the night, leaving behind skeleton buildings and streets slicked with ash. People were already moving through the ruins, picking through debris, looking for bodies, trying to rebuild what had been destroyed in 3 days of chaos. "The execution is in 2 hours, Serafina said quietly. "I know. The Emperor expects you to attend. I know that too. Will you?" Vivian finally looked at her. Serafina's face was unreadable, calm, like she was discussing the weather instead of watching a man die. "Would you?" Vivian asked. "If someone I loved was being executed for my crimes?" Serafina tilted her head. "No. I'd burn the city down before I let that happen. The city's already burned. Then I'd burn what was left." Vivian turned back to the window. "That's not an option. Everything's an option. You just have to be willing to pay the price. And what's the price for saving Cedric? The Empire? Probably. Then it's too high." Serafina laughed softly. "You don't believe that." "I have to." "No. You want to. There's a difference." She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the frame. "You're stronger than you think," she said. "Stronger than Cedric, stronger than the Emperor, maybe even stronger than me. But strength doesn't mean anything if you don't use it." "What am I supposed to do? Storm the dungeons? Fight the entire Imperial Guard? If that's what it takes." "That's insane." Serafina smiled. "Welcome to survival." She left, and Vivian stood alone in the growing light and felt something crack open inside her chest. Not grief, not rage, something older, something that had been buried for 15 years under layers of fear and self-preservation and the desperate need to be good. Her father's voice. Not a memory, just an echo. The kind that lived in your bones. Sometimes the only way to save the world is to break it first. He had said that once. She didn't remember when or why, just that he had been standing in his study with ledgers spread across his desk and blood on his hands from a paper cut. And he had looked at her with eyes that were tired and sad and absolutely certain. They'll call you a monster, but monsters are just people who refuse to lose. She hadn't understood then. She understood now. Vivian left her chambers and walked through the palace like a woman heading to her own execution. Servants pressed themselves against walls to let her pass. Guards watched her with wary eyes. Everyone could feel it. The change. The thing inside her that had stopped pretending to be civilized. She found the emperor in his war room surrounded by maps and reports and advisors who looked like they hadn't slept in days. He glanced up when she entered. His face was lined with exhaustion. "Duchess," he said, "I didn't expect to see you until the execution. Cancel it." The room went silent. Every head turned. The emperor set down his quill. "Excuse me?" "Cancel the execution. Cedric doesn't deserve to die. He confessed to crimes Magnus committed. We both know that. The confession is signed, witnessed, legally binding. It's also a lie." The emperor stood, his chair scraped against stone. "Do you think I don't know that? Then why are you doing this?" "Because the alternative is worse." His voice cracked through the room like a whip. The advisors flinched. Vivian didn't. "The city is on the edge of collapse," the emperor continued. "The noble houses are threatening rebellion. The northern provinces are preparing for war. If I don't give the people someone to blame, someone to punish, this empire will tear itself apart. So you're killing an innocent man. I'm saving thousands of innocent people. By sacrificing one." "Yes." The emperor walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the veins in his eyes, the tremor in his hands. "You wanted justice," he said quietly. "You wanted the people responsible for your parents' deaths to pay. Well, this is what justice looks like. Ugly, unfair, necessary. This isn't justice, this is cowardice." The emperor's hand moved faster than thought. It stopped an inch from her face. Not a slap. A warning. "Be very careful," he said, "what you accuse me of." "Or what? You'll execute me too?" "If I have to." They stared at each other. Two people standing on opposite sides of a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Behind them, the advisors watched with the kind of fascination usually reserved for gladiator fights. Finally, Vivian smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Then do it," she said. "Execute me. Right here, right now, because I'm not leaving this room until you cancel that execution." The emperor's jaw clenched. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" She pulled a knife from her belt, small, sharp, the same one she'd used on Magnus. She pressed it against her own throat hard enough to draw blood. The advisors gasped. One of them lunged forward. The emperor held up a hand. "Stop," he said. "Make me. Put down the knife, Vivian. Cancel the execution." "I can't." "Then we both die here." Her hand didn't shake. Her voice didn't waver. And the emperor saw it. The thing inside her that had stopped caring about survival, that had decided some things were worth dying for. He took a step back. "You're insane," he said. "Probably. This is treason. Add it to the list." The emperor looked at his advisors, at the maps, at the reports detailing everything that was falling apart, then back at Vivian with her knife still pressed against her throat. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "A trial. A real one. With evidence and witnesses and the truth. The truth will destroy us. Then let it." The emperor closed his eyes. "You don't understand what you're asking. I understand perfectly. You want me to let Cedric die to save your empire. I'm saying the empire's not worth saving if that's the price. There are millions of people who have already paid enough." Her voice was flat, final. The emperor opened his eyes and looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You really would do it," he said. "Kill yourself. Right here." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I'm tired of letting good people die for bad reasons. Cedric isn't good. He's complicit. He's also the only reason I'm alive, and I won't let him die alone." The room held its breath. Outside, a bell tolled. 1 hour until the execution. The emperor walked back to his chair, sat down heavily. He looked older suddenly, like the weight of the empire was crushing him from the inside. "Fine," he said. Vivian lowered the knife. "What? You want a trial?" "You'll get a trial. Public, transparent, the whole empire watching." He leaned forward. "But when the truth comes out, and it will come out, you'll be the one responsible for what happens next." The riots, the rebellions, the blood, all of it on your hands. I can live with that. Can you?" She met his eyes and said nothing, because they both knew the answer. The emperor gestured to his advisors. "Draft the order, postpone the execution. Announce a public trial for Duke Cedric Ashcroft to be held in 3 days." "Your Majesty," one of them protested, "the mob will have to wait, but the noble houses will fall in line or face the same fate." The advisor swallowed. "Yes, Your Majesty." They filed out. The Emperor and Vivian were left alone in the war room with maps of an empire that was bleeding to death. "You just bought him 3 days," the Emperor said. "What are you going to do with them?" "Find the truth. The truth is already written in blood and ash. Then I'll write a new one." She turned to leave. The Emperor's voice stopped her. "Vivian." She looked back. "If you do this," he said, "there's no going back. You'll have enemies, powerful ones. People who will spend the rest of their lives trying to destroy you." "Good," she said. "I'm tired of being afraid." She left him sitting in his war room and walked back through the palace with blood drying on her throat and a plan forming in her mind. Not a good plan, not a safe one, but the only one she had left. She found Serafina in the garden smoking a cigarette and watching servants clean up broken glass from the riots. "I need your help," Vivian said. Serafina exhaled smoke, took her time answering. Finally, "What kind of help?" "The kind that gets people killed. My favorite kind." "I'm serious." "So am I." Serafina stubbed out her cigarette. "What do you need?" "Information. Evidence. Anything that proves Magnus was working with foreign powers. That the conspiracy goes deeper than one family." "And where exactly do you expect to find that?" "The Ashcroft estate. Magnus kept records of everything. Insurance, Cedric called it. If we can find them." "The estate burned 2 days ago." Vivian's heart stopped. "What?" "During the riots. Someone set it on fire. By the time the guards arrived, it was rubble." "Who?" "No idea. Could have been rioters. Could have been someone covering their tracks. Or someone who knew we'd come looking." Serafina nodded. "Which means whoever's really pulling the strings is still out there, still watching." Vivian's mind raced. The ledgers. The evidence. Everything she needed to save Cedric was gone. Burned. Erased. "Unless the hidden heir," she said suddenly. "What?" "The child. The one Magnus mentioned in his letters. The heir connected to the imperial bloodline. If we can find them." Serafina shook her head. "No one even knows if that child exists. It could be a rumor, a lie Magnus spread to gain leverage, or it could be real. And if it is, someone killed to keep it hidden. And you think that someone is still in the palace?" "Yes." Serafina studied her. Then, "You're talking about going after the imperial family itself, if that's where the truth leads. That's suicide. Only if we fail." Serafina laughed. It was a sharp, bright sound. "You really have lost your mind." "Probably." "Good." Serafina stood. "Losing your mind is the first step to survival. Let's go." "Where?" "The Imperial Archives. If there's any record of this hidden heir, it'll be there." They walked through the palace like conspirators, like rebels, like women who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The Imperial Archives were buried 3 floors below the palace in a maze of stone corridors and locked doors. The keeper was an ancient woman with ink-stained fingers and eyes like a hawk. She looked up when they entered. "The archives are closed," she said. "We have imperial authority," Serafina said smoothly. The keeper's eyes narrowed. "Show me the seal." Serafina pulled a signet ring from her pocket. The Emperor's seal. She must have stolen it at some point. The keeper examined it, nodded reluctantly. "What are you looking for?" "Birth records," Vivian said. "Going back 20 years. Anyone connected to the imperial bloodline. That's thousands of documents. Then we'll be here a while." The keeper led them into the depths of the archives. Rows and rows of shelves stretching into darkness. Documents stacked floor to ceiling, the weight of centuries pressing down like a physical thing. "You have until nightfall," the keeper said. "Then I locked the doors, with or without you inside." She left. Vivian and Serafina looked at each other, then at the impossible task in front of them. This is insane, Vivian said. Yes, Serafina agreed. But we're doing it anyway. They split up. Vivienne took the western wing. Serafina took the east. They pulled documents and scanned pages and left trails of paper in their wake. Hours passed. Dust coated their hands. Their eyes burned from reading by candlelight. Nothing. 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 And then Vivian found it. A birth certificate, dated 19 years ago. Mother's name, Isabella Voltaire. Father's name, blank. But there was a notation in the margin, written in faded ink. Imperial blood confirmed. Child under royal protection. Location, sealed by order of Emperor Matthias. Vivienne's hands shook. Isabella Voltaire, Serafina's sister. She ran to find Serafina, found her in the eastern wing surrounded by ledgers. Your sister had a child, Vivienne said breathlessly. Serafina went very still. What? 19 years ago. The father's name isn't listed, but it's marked as imperial blood. That's impossible. Isabella never... She stopped. Her face went pale. Oh God, she whispered. What? The Emperor's brother, Prince Aldrich. They had an affair. I thought it ended. But if she was pregnant, then the child would have a legitimate claim to the throne. Serafina stood. Where is it now? The child? The location's sealed, but there's a reference number. Serafina grabbed the document, scanned it. Her expression changed, hardened. I know where this is, she said. Where? The Northern Convent, St. Helena's. It's where they send imperial bastards to be forgotten. She looked at Vivienne. That's a 3-day ride, even with fast horses. The trial's in 3 days. Then we better move fast. They left the archives and went straight to the stables. Found horses, stole supplies. No one stopped them. No one asked questions. Maybe everyone was too tired to care. Maybe they knew better than to stand in the way of 2 women with nothing to lose. They rode out of the capital as the sun set. Behind them, the palace blazed with light. Ahead, the road stretched into darkness. This is the stupidest thing I've ever done, Serafina said. Same, Vivienne agreed. And yet we're doing it anyway, because we're idiots, or heroes. What's the difference? Serafina laughed. Heroes get statues. Idiots get graves. They rode through the night, through forests and villages and roads that turned to mud under their horses' hooves. They didn't stop, didn't rest. Survival meant movement. Stillness meant death. On the second day, they were ambushed. The attackers came out of the trees like shadows. 6 men, armed, professional, not bandits, assassins. Vivienne's horse reared. She hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through her shoulder. Her vision blurred. Serafina was already fighting. Her blade flashed in the sunlight. 1 man went down, then another. But there were too many. A knife pressed against Vivienne's throat. She froze. The man holding her smiled. He had a scar across his face and eyes like dead fish. Lady Voltaire, he said. The nobles send their regards. He pulled the knife back to strike, and Cedric appeared out of nowhere and drove a sword through the man's back. The assassin collapsed. Cedric stood over him, breathing hard, his face gray with pain. The wound in his side had reopened, blood soaked through his shirt. Vivienne stared. How? I escaped, he said. Last night. Figured you'd do something stupid. You're supposed to be in prison, and you're supposed to have better survival instincts. He pulled her to her feet. Around them, Serafina finished the last assassin. She was breathing hard but grinning. Well, she said, this is exciting. We need to move, Cedric said. There'll be more. They took the assassins' horses and rode. Faster now, desperate. The convent was close. 1 more day. They could make it, if they didn't die first. That night they made camp in a cave. No fire. Too dangerous. They sat in darkness and listened to the forest breathe around them. You shouldn't have come, Vivienne told Cedric. Neither should you. I'm trying to save you. I'm trying to save you. Then we're both idiots. Apparently, he shifted, winced. The wound was bad. Worse than bad. He needed a physician, stitches, rest, everything they didn't have time for. Let me see it, Vivienne said. It's fine. Liar. She pulled his shirt aside. The wound was infected, red and swollen and leaking fluid that smelled like death. He should have been dead already. The fact that he wasn't was pure stubbornness. "This will kill you," she said quietly. "Eventually." "Cedric, I know." He met her eyes. "But not before I get you to that convent. Why are you doing this?" "Because I love you, and because I owe you a truth." "What truth?" "That I was wrong. About everything. I thought protecting you meant lying to you, keeping you in the dark, making decisions for you. But all I did was take away your choices." She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing, just sat beside him in the darkness and listened to him breathe, each breath a little shallower than the last. "If I die before we get there," he said, "promise me something. Don't. Promise me you'll finish this. Find the heir. Expose the truth, even if it destroys the empire." "I can't do that alone." "Yes, you can. You're the strongest person I've ever met. I'm terrified." "Good. That means you're not stupid." He closed his eyes, leaned his head back against stone. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for all of it." "I know. Do you forgive me?" She thought about that, about 2 years of lies, about parents murdered and identities stolen and a man who had saved her by destroying her. "Ask me again when this is over," she said. He smiled. It was a sad smile, a dying smile. "Deal." They rode at dawn, one more day. The convent was close. They could see it on the horizon, gray stone walls rising from green hills like a fortress. But the gates were closed when they arrived. Cedric pounded on the wood. Nothing. He pounded again. Finally, a voice called down from the walls. "The convent is closed to visitors? We're here on imperial business," Serafina shouted. "Then show me the seal." Serafina held up the stolen ring. The gates creaked open. Inside, the convent was silent. Too silent, like everyone was holding their breath. A nun approached, old, severe. Her eyes swept over them with the kind of judgment reserved for the irredeemable. "What do you want?" she asked. "We're looking for someone," Vivian said. "A child. Brought here 19 years ago. Imperial blood." The nun's expression didn't change. "There is no such person here. Don't lie. I speak only truth." Vivian stepped forward, closer, close enough to see the fear in the nun's eyes. "People are dying," she said quietly. "Good people. Innocent people. Because someone is hiding the truth. If that child is here, I need to know." The nun's jaw tightened. "Even if such a person existed, I could not tell you. I am bound by sacred vows." "Then break them." "I cannot." Cedric collapsed. He hit the ground like a felled tree. Vivian was at his side in seconds. His pulse was thread-thin, his breathing shallow. The infection had spread. He was dying. "Please," Vivian said to the nun. "Please help him." The nun looked at Cedric, at Vivian, at Serafina standing with her hand on her sword. Finally, she sighed. "Come," she said. She led them through corridors to a small room. A bed, clean sheets. She examined Cedric's wound with practiced hands. "This is very bad," she said. "Can you save him?" "I can try. But he needs rest. Days, maybe weeks. We don't have weeks. Then he will die." Vivian's hands curled into fists. The nun mixed herbs, applied poultices, stitched the wound with thread that looked like it had been blessed. Maybe it had been. When she finished, she looked at Vivian. "The person you seek," she said quietly. "The child. She is here." Vivian's breath caught. "Where?" "In the eastern wing. But she knows nothing of her heritage. We kept her safe by keeping her ignorant." "What's her name?" The nun hesitated. Then, "Elena. She goes by Elena. Take me to her." The nun led Vivian through more corridors, to a door at the end of a long hall. She knocked. "Elena? Someone is here to see you." The door opened, and Vivian found herself looking at a girl with dark hair and gray eyes, and a face that looked like it had been carved from the same stone as the emperor's. Imperial blood. Undeniable. The girl, Elena, looked between them with confusion. "Who are you?" she asked. Vivian opened her mouth to answer, and assassins burst through the window behind her. Glass shattered. Bodies moved, steel flashed in candlelight. Vivian shoved Elena backward, turned. blocked a blade with her bare hands. Pain screamed through her palms, blood slicked her fingers. Serafina was already fighting. One assassin down, two. But there were more. Too many. "Run!" Vivian shouted at Elena. The girl ran, and Vivian fought like something feral, like something that had forgotten how to die. She grabbed a candlestick, swung it like a club. Bone crunched. Someone screamed. Behind her, Cedric appeared in the doorway, barely standing, sword in hand. He shouldn't have been able to stand, shouldn't have been able to fight, but he did both anyway. Because dying men don't follow rules, they carved through assassins like angels of death. Blood painted the walls, bodies fell. And then Cedric took a blade to the chest. He gasped, staggered, his sword fell from his hand. "No!" Vivian screamed. She killed the man who stabbed him, killed him with her bare hands. Felt his throat crush under her fingers, felt him stop breathing. Then she was at Cedric's side. He was on his knees, blood bubbling from his lips. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I tried. Don't you dare die. Too late. Cedric, find her, save her, end this." His eyes closed, his body went still, and something inside Vivian shattered completely. She stood, covered in blood, surrounded by bodies. The girl, Elena, stood frozen in the hallway with eyes wide as moons. "We need to go," Serafina said. "Now." Vivian looked at Cedric's body, at the man who had saved her, who had loved her, who had died protecting a truth the Empire wanted buried. "We're not leaving him," she said. "We don't have a choice. Then I'll make one." She grabbed Cedric's sword, turned to face the doorway where more assassins were coming, because they never stopped coming, because the Empire would burn itself to ash before it let the truth survive. Vivian raised the sword and smiled, because she had nothing left to lose. And people with nothing to lose are the most dangerous things in the world. "Come on then," she said. The assassins charged, and Vivian met them like a storm made flesh. The sword was heavier than Vivian remembered. Or maybe she was just tired. Tired of fighting, tired of bleeding, tired of watching people die for truths that should have mattered but somehow never did when weighed against the Empire's need to survive. She killed 3 more assassins before her arms started shaking. 4 before she realized she was crying. 5 before Serafina pulled her backward and took over the fight with a brutality that would have shocked her 2 weeks ago. Now it just felt necessary. Elena, the hidden heir, the girl who didn't know she was the match that could burn the Empire down, stood pressed against the convent wall with her hands over her mouth. She was 19. Just 19. Old enough to bleed, but not old enough to understand why. "Get her out of here," Vivian told Serafina. "What about you?" "I'll follow. That's a lie." Serafina's eyes were sharp. Knowing. She had survived 2 decades in the imperial court by recognizing when people were about to do something stupid and irreversible. Vivian smiled. It felt wrong on her face, like wearing someone else's expression. "Then it's a good lie." Serafina grabbed Elena's arm and pulled her toward the back corridor. The girl looked at Vivian with eyes that held too many questions and not enough time to ask them. "Who are you?" Elena managed. "Someone who's tired of watching innocent people pay for other people's sins," Vivian said. "Now go." They went, and Vivian turned back to face the assassins still pouring through the broken window. Still coming, always coming, because the Empire had deep pockets and shallow morals and an infinite supply of men willing to kill for coin. She thought about Cedric's body cooling on the stone floor behind her, about the way his eyes had looked in those final seconds. Not afraid, just tired, like he'd been carrying a weight for so long that dying felt like relief. Maybe that was what survival cost you. The ability to be afraid, the capacity to feel anything except the next threat, the next choice, the next body falling. She killed 2 more assassins. Then her sword broke. The blade snapped clean in half against someone's armor. She was left holding a useless hilt and a prayer that wouldn't save her because prayers never saved anyone in stories like this. An assassin's knife found her shoulder. Pain exploded bright and hot. She stumbled, fell, hit stone that was slick with blood that might have been hers or someone else's, or everyone's all mixed together. The assassin stood over her, raised his blade, and the Emperor walked through the door. He wasn't alone. Behind him came the Imperial Guard. 50 men in polished armor with swords drawn and faces blank as death masks. They moved with the efficiency of a machine. No hesitation, no mercy. The assassins didn't stand a chance. It was over in seconds. Bodies dropped. Steel sang. Blood painted walls that had probably never seen violence in their centuries of quiet prayer and forgotten sins. When the last assassin fell, the Emperor looked at Vivian still on the floor with a broken sword and a shoulder bleeding through her shirt. "You're an idiot," he said. She laughed. It came out wet and broken. "So I've been told." He offered his hand. She stared at it for a long moment, then took it. Let him pull her to her feet. Her legs shook. Everything hurt. She was pretty sure she was going to pass out. But not yet. Not while there was still work to do. "How did you find us?" she asked. "I'm the Emperor. I know everything." "That's a lie." "Yes." His mouth twitched. Almost a smile. "Lady Voltaire sent word. 2 days ago. Before you even left the capital." Vivian looked toward the corridor where Serafina had disappeared with Elena. "Of course she did. She's smarter than both of us combined," the Emperor said. "She knew you'd do something reckless. Knew you'd need backup, so she made sure I'd be here. To save us or stop us? Both." He walked past her to where Cedric's body lay, knelt beside it, placed a hand on the dead man's chest in something that might have been respect or grief or just exhaustion. "He was a good man," the Emperor said quietly. "In the end, he was a complicated man. Same thing." The Emperor stood, turned to face her. His face was lined with something that looked like age, but might have just been the weight of everything he'd lost in the past week. "The girl," he said. "Elena. Where is she?" "Safe. I need to see her." "No." Vivian's voice was flat. Final. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "She's imperial blood. That makes her my responsibility. She's a person. That makes her everyone's responsibility. Don't lecture me about responsibility. I've been carrying this empire on my back for 30 years, and look where it's gotten you. A capital in ruins. A court full of traitors. A dynasty built on lies and blood." The Emperor's jaw tightened. "What would you have me do? Abdicate? Let the empire tear itself apart? I'd have you tell the truth. For once? Just once? The truth will destroy us? Then maybe we deserve to be destroyed." They stared at each other. Two people standing in a convent that smelled like death and old prayers. Two people who had both killed to survive, who had both learned that power was just another word for the things you were willing to sacrifice. Behind them, a nun appeared, the same one who had tried to help Cedric. Her face was pale, shocked. She looked at the bodies, at the blood, at the empire's violence painted across walls meant for peace. "This is a holy place," she whispered. "Not anymore," the Emperor said. He gestured to his guards. "Clean this up. Burn the bodies. No one speaks of what happened here. Understood?" The guards nodded, started moving, efficient, practiced. This wasn't the first massacre they'd cleaned up. Probably wouldn't be the last. Vivian walked away, through corridors, past rooms where nuns watched with frightened eyes, past evidence of the empire's reach, its willingness to corrupt anything to preserve itself. She found Serafina and Elena in a small chamber near the back of the convent. Elena was sitting on a bed. Serafina stood by the window like a guard, or a warden. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. "Is it over?" Elena asked. Her voice was small, young. She had her mother's eyes, her father's jaw, features that would have marked her as royalty to anyone who knew where to look. Vivian sat beside her, felt the weight of the past 2 weeks settle into her bones like poison. "For now," she said. "Who were those men?" "Assassins. Sent to kill you." "Why?" "Because you're dangerous. Because your existence threatens powerful people. Because the empire is built on secrets, and you're the kind of secret that could bring it all down." Elena's hands twisted in her lap. "I don't understand. I'm nobody, just an orphan. The sisters told me my parents died when I was a baby. They lied." Vivian took a breath, let it out slowly, felt the truth gather in her mouth like glass. "Your mother was Isabella Voltaire. Your father was Prince Aldrich, the Emperor's brother. That makes you imperial blood. It makes you a threat to everyone who's built their power on the current dynasty." Elena looked at Serafina. Is that true? Serafina nodded. I'm your aunt. Isabella was my sister. Did you know? About me? No, not until 3 days ago. If I had known, I would have... She stopped, looked away. Because what could she have done? Protected Elena? Hidden her? Killed her to keep the secret safe? There were no good answers, just choices that felt less terrible than the alternatives. What happens now? Elena asked. The Emperor entered the room. Elena flinched. Serafina's hand moved to her sword. Now, the Emperor said, we decide what kind of empire we want to be. He crossed to Elena, knelt in front of her so they were eye level. His face was gentler than Vivian had ever seen it, almost human. You're my niece, he said, my brother's child. I should have known about you, should have protected you. I failed you before you were even born. Elena stared at him. Are you going to kill me? The question hung in the air like smoke. The Emperor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been shame. No, he said, I'm going to give you a choice. What kind of choice? You can come with me. To the capital. I'll acknowledge you publicly as imperial blood. Give you a title, land, a place in the court. You'll have power, protection, everything that comes with your birthright. He paused. Or you can stay here. Continue your life as Elena. No one will know who you are. You'll be safe, anonymous, free. That's not a choice, Vivian said. That's a trap. The Emperor looked at her. How so? Because if she goes with you, she becomes a pawn. Someone you can use to legitimize your rule, to prove the dynasty is still strong. And if she stays here, she spends the rest of her life looking over her shoulder waiting for the next assassin. So what would you have me offer her? The truth. And then let her decide. The Emperor stood, walked to the window, looked out at gardens that were probably beautiful when they weren't stained with blood. The truth, he said slowly, is that this empire is dying. The noble houses are fracturing. The provinces are rebelling. Foreign powers are circling like vultures. In 5 years, maybe less, there won't be an empire left to inherit. Then why are you fighting so hard to preserve it? Vivian asked. Because someone has to. Because if the empire falls, millions of people fall with it. Farmers, merchants, children who've never seen a palace or cared about politics. They're the ones who pay when dynasties collapse. He turned back to Elena. If you come with me, he said, you won't just inherit a title. You'll inherit a responsibility. To those millions of people. To a future that's uncertain and probably terrible. It's not power I'm offering you. It's burden. Elena looked at Vivian. What do you think I should do? Vivian wanted to tell her to run, to disappear, to find a quiet corner of the world where empires didn't reach and live a life that belonged to no one but herself. But she thought about her own parents, about the choice they'd made to stand up to corruption even when it cost them everything, about Cedric choosing to die so she could live, about all the people who had decided that some things were worth the burden. I think, Vivian said slowly, that you should do whatever lets you sleep at night. That's not an answer. Yes, it is. It's just not the one you wanted. Elena was quiet for a long time. The room held its breath. Outside, guards moved bodies. Inside, the weight of a dynasty pressed down on a girl who'd woken up that morning thinking she was nobody. Finally, Elena spoke. If I go with you, she said to the Emperor, what happens to her? She gestured at Vivian. The Emperor's expression was unreadable. That depends on her. He looked at Vivian. You wanted justice, he said. You wanted the people responsible for your parents' deaths to pay. I'm offering you that. Every noble involved in the conspiracy, every official who took bribes, every guard who looked the other way. I'll arrest them, try them, execute them, if that's what you want. His voice hardened. But if I do that, the empire collapses. You'll get your revenge and millions of people will pay the price. Or, Vivian said, I let them go. Walk away. Pretend none of this happened. I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm asking you to choose vengeance or survival, justice or mercy, the truth or peace. Vivian laughed. It was a bitter sound. Those aren't opposites. They're just different flavors of the same poison. Maybe, but you still have to choose which one to swallow. She looked at Elena, at Serafina, at the Emperor, at the ruins of everything she'd thought she wanted, and she realized she was tired of choosing, tired of carrying the weight of other people's sins, tired of being the person who had to decide who lived and who died, and what the empire was worth. "I choose myself," she said. The room went silent. "What does that mean?" the emperor asked. "It means I'm done. With the court, with the conspiracies, with trying to fix an empire that's been broken since before I was born." She stood, felt her legs shake, steadied herself. "You want to know what I think?" she said. "I think my parents died because they believed truth mattered more than power. And I think they were wrong. Not because truth doesn't matter, but because power decides what truth is." She walked to the door. "So keep your empire, keep your secrets, keep your lies. I'm going to find a quiet place where none of it can touch me. And I'm going to learn to sleep again." "Vivienne," the emperor's voice stopped her. She looked back. "If you walk away now," he said, "you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if you could have made a difference." "Maybe." She smiled. It was the first real smile she'd felt in weeks. "But at least I'll be alive to wonder." She left. Behind her, she heard Serafina say something. The emperor respond. Elena asked another question, but it all felt distant, like voices from another life. She walked through the convent, past nuns cleaning blood from floors, past guards standing at attention, past evidence of violence in a place meant for peace. The irony wasn't lost on her. Outside, the sun was setting. The sky burned orange and red like the capital had burned, like everything burned eventually when you built it on lies. A horse was waiting, one of the Imperial Guard's mounts, saddle still warm, bags already packed with supplies she hadn't requested. Serafina stepped out of the shadows. "You didn't think I'd let you leave without saying goodbye," she said. Vivienne looked at her. At the woman who had started all of this by tearing away a mask, who had manipulated and schemed and survived by being smarter and colder than everyone else. "Thank you," Vivienne said. "For what?" "For being honest about being dishonest. It's more than most people manage." Serafina laughed. "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Don't get used to it." They stood in silence for a moment, two women who had survived when they should have died, who had learned that the only way to win was to stop playing. "What will you do?" Serafina asked. "After." "I don't know. Find a village somewhere. Open that school I mentioned. Teach children that the world is cruel, but they don't have to be. That's ambitious." "No, it's just different." Serafina pulled something from her pocket. The silver raven mask, the one that had fallen at the masquerade, the one that had started everything. "You forgot this," she said. Vivienne took it, felt the weight of it, the cold metal, the delicate feathers. Then she dropped it on the ground. "I don't need masks anymore," she said. She mounted the horse, felt the animal shift beneath her. Ready, waiting. Serafina watched her. "What should I tell them?" "Elena, the Emperor, everyone who asks about you, tell them I'm dead. It's easier than the truth." "Which is?" "That I'm tired of being angry, tired of being afraid, tired of letting dead people tell me how to live." She looked at the convent one last time, at the place where Cedric had died, where Elena had learned she was more than she thought, where the Empire's reach had stained walls meant for prayer. "I loved him," Vivienne said quietly. "Cedric. Despite everything. Despite the lies. I loved him." "I know," Serafina said. "Does that make me weak?" "No, it makes you human." Vivienne nodded. "Then maybe human is enough." She rode into the sunset like a woman in a story. The kind that ended with new beginnings instead of happy endings, because happy endings were a lie, and new beginnings were just another word for survival. Behind her, the empire continued. The emperor and Elena returned to the capital. Trials were held. Some people were executed. Most were pardoned. The noble houses regained their power. The court returned to its conspiracies. Life went on because life always went on, even when you wanted it to stop. Serafina stayed, became one of Elena's advisors, taught her how to navigate court politics, how to smile while holding a knife, how to survive. And Vivienne rode north, away from the capital, away from the palace, away from everything that had defined her for 2 years and destroyed her in 2 weeks. She rode until she found a village so small it didn't have a name, just a collection of houses clustered around a well, fields of wheat, children playing in dirt streets, people who had never heard of Duke Cedric Ashcroft, or the Thornfield tragedy, or the great unmasking at the Imperial Masquerade. She bought a small house on the edge of town with money she'd taken from the Ashcroft estate before it burned. Money that had probably been stolen from her family in the first place. The irony made her laugh. She opened a school in the front room, 6 children at first, then 10, then 20. She taught them to read, to write, to think. She taught them that power was dangerous and truth was complicated and survival meant knowing when to fight and when to walk away. She never told them about the empire, about courts and conspiracies and masks that hid more than faces. They didn't need to know. Maybe no one did. Months passed, then years. The capital felt like something from another life. A dream she'd had once and couldn't quite remember the details of. Sometimes she thought about Cedric, about the way his eyes had looked in those final moments, about the confession he'd written to save her, about love that destroyed what it tried to protect. Sometimes she thought about her parents, about faces she couldn't remember and voices she'd forgotten, about a tragedy that had shaped her life but didn't have to define it anymore. Sometimes she thought about the Emperor, about Elena, about whether they'd managed to hold the empire together or if it had collapsed under its own weight. But mostly, she thought about the children, about the way they laughed, about the questions they asked, about the futures they still believed in. One morning, 5 years after the night the mask fell, Vivienne woke to find a letter on her doorstep. No seal, no signature, just a few lines in handwriting she recognized. The empire survived. Barely. Elena rules now. The emperor died last winter. Old age, they said. But I think it was exhaustion. You were right to leave. I wish I had the courage to do the same. The mask is still here, in the palace vaults, gathering dust. Sometimes I look at it and remember the night everything changed. I hope you're happy, or at least at peace. One of those things you taught me are different. S. Vivienne read the letter twice, then burned it in the fireplace, watched the paper curl and blacken and turn to ash. She didn't reply. There was nothing to say. The person she'd been at the masquerade was dead. The woman she'd become didn't owe the empire anything. That afternoon, one of her students asked a question. "Miss Vivienne?" the girl said. She was 8, gap-toothed, curious in the way children are before the world teaches them to be afraid. Yes? Why do people lie? Vivienne thought about that, about masks and secrets and empires built on blood. Because sometimes, she said carefully, the truth is too dangerous or too painful or too complicated, but lying is wrong. Yes. Then why do people do it? Because people aren't good or bad. They're just people, trying to survive, making choices that feel necessary at the time. The girl frowned. That doesn't make sense. I know, but most things don't. You just have to decide what kind of person you want to be when faced with impossible choices. What kind of person are you? Vivienne looked out the window, at fields of wheat, at children playing, at a life she'd built from the ruins of everything she'd lost. I'm still figuring that out, she said. The girl smiled. Then I'll wait. Good. Vivienne smiled back. So will I. That night, she stood in her small house and looked at the mirror on the wall, saw a face that was older than it should be, lines around eyes that had seen too much, scars that would never fully heal, but also something else, something that looked like peace, or at least the possibility of it. She thought about the silver raven mask lying in the dirt outside the convent, about the moment she'd dropped it, about the choice to walk away from vengeance and power and all the things that should have mattered but didn't anymore. And she realized something. The empire hadn't taken everything from her. It had tried. It had murdered her parents, stolen her name, forced her to become someone she didn't recognize. But in the end, she'd survived by choosing herself, by deciding that her life, her peace, her future, her happiness mattered more than revenge, more than justice, more than the empire itself. That wasn't weakness. It was the bravest thing she'd ever done. Outside, stars filled the sky, the same stars that hung over the capital, over the palace, over the ruins of the Ashcroft estate, the same stars that had watched empires rise and fall and rise again for thousands of years. And tomorrow, she would wake up, teach her students, make dinner, live a life that belonged to no one but herself. Because the mask had fallen, the empire had survived, and Vivian Ashcroft, Alara Thornfield, whoever she was now, had finally learned the truth that had eluded her for so long. Survival wasn't about winning. It was about learning to live with what you'd lost, about finding new things to fight for when the old battles destroyed you, about choosing peace over power even when everything inside you screamed for blood. It was about taking off the mask and never putting it back on. The capital could keep its conspiracies. The court could keep its lies. The empire could keep grinding itself to dust under the weight of its own corruption. She had children to teach, a future to build, a life to live. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.